So we'll just sort of dive in. And I think what I'd like to do first of all is sort of try to translate what you were talking about in your speech to what you might do as President of the United States. Because it's certainly one thing to be campaigning for the office, and as President Obama himself has found, it's another to occupy the White House and try to work with the Congress. The American people seem to be somewhat dissatisfied with the lack of ability to enact policy in Washington, given the budgetary, dare we say, process over the past several months. So you're President of the United States. We don't know what the complexion of the Congress will be, but what are the several steps that you would take that parallel the campaign speech that you just gave, which would work to attack some of these larger problems that you're talking about?
In order to get the economy growing again, you have to liquidate the debt. You liquidate the debt by quit bailing out these agencies, which means veto the bills where the Congress tries to bail out the special interests, as well as curtail what the Fed can do in the best and most rapid manner possible for them to get out of the business of taking care of their cronies. And this would be a really very strong message. But there has to be a lot of spending cuts as well. And I'm going to be proposing in detail a cut in spending of $1 trillion. You know, we're $1.5 trillion in deficit. And all this talk about cutting in the future and tinkering on the edges and cutting future increase, it means nothing, and the American people know it. So we need cuts this time, so I would propose the cuts that we need to do. I would guarantee that we would not be abusing the civil liberties of individuals. I would bring the troops home, let those military personnel come back here and start spending their money right here at home, which would be an economic stimulus. So there's a lot the president can do, but also working with the Congress is key. And this is where I think a philosophy that I'm talking about brings people together, not by two sides sacrificing their beliefs, but I work quite well with progressive and liberal Democrats. We had coalitions of trying to prevent the wars. We still exist and talk to each other trying to get us out of these wars. And progressive and liberal Democrats are more attuned to trying to protect personal civil liberties, and at the same time bringing people together and realizing that we do have to cut spending. So it is a major task. There is no doubt about it. But I believe the program I'm talking about has a much better chance of solving our problems than to continue with the status quo.
Okay, so a couple of follow-up questions, since you're at the National Press Club and we like to keep our reputation. Why can't you outline what the spending cuts are today? And if you're going to bring all the soldiers home, we've got 14 million unemployed people in the United States right now. Yes, we'd like for them to be great consumers, but where are they going to find jobs? The first thing, you bring them home, you don't put them out on the street so that they just spend their money here at home. But if you want to look at a good example historically and economically, look at what we did after World War II. I think there were like 5 or 6 million people. They just got out of the military, and they came home, and they slashed the military. They didn't stimulate the economy. They slashed the military budget like 60% and cut taxes 30%. And we finally went back to work again. So I wouldn't be frightened by that. If you understand the market, you don't have to be concerned about it. But as far as indicating the cuts, I can talk in broad categories, and I'll be glad to do that, but I want to design a program where you can even see it on the line item. But ultimately, and also in the introduction, this is not a criticism, but it frequently happens about when we talk about the defense budget. I don't want to cut defense. I want to cut the military. Eisenhower tried to teach us something about the military-industrial complex, building weapons that we don't use and fighting wars we don't have any business being in. So we're not cutting defense there, and I described a little bit about the foreign policy. We have less defense because of that. I mean, our Coast Guard is over in the Persian Gulf. Where do you think our National Guards are when we want to use them to help rescue operations when natural disasters hit? They're over in Afghanistan. So I would say, yes, you can cut a lot. You can cut hundreds of billions of dollars out of the military budget. You can cut programs that have no constitutional authority. Where does the authority come to have a Department of Energy or a Department of Education, Department of Commerce, a department to pass out subsidies to farmers? I mean, will they not exist if we have free markets and sound money?
I mean, we have to understand how the markets work. We have to have confidence how the market works and how freedom works. But the cuts can be there, and hopefully in due time the specifics will be there, and you can look at every line item which we're going to cut. But I mean, you could slash the budget probably by 70% if you said, anything that is not authorized directly by the Constitution no longer can be paid for. I mean, it is this total lack of respect for the Constitution, whether it's going to war or reinstitutionalizing prohibition without a constitutional amendment. All these kind of things, we have just gone so far from what was originally intended by the founders of this country.
So just to follow up then, when would you have specific ideas about where to cut? When would you have those specifics?
A couple of weeks, I believe. But I'm probably more specific than others. You know, if I want to get rid of the Department of Education, Department of Energy, Department of Commerce, Department of Agriculture, and cut the military budget in half, that's a pretty good start, and that's pretty specific.
Okay, very good. Very good. So you talk quite a bit in your speech, and you can stay up here if you want. Otherwise, we're not going to get any more questions in. You talk quite a bit in your speech about the protests now occurring on Wall Street. What do you see as your areas of agreement with those people? And as president, what would you do to ameliorate their concerns, since they seem to be very upset primarily with quote-unquote big business and the banks?
Right, and I can't speak for the people out there because I don't know who they are and exactly what they're demonstrating against. I can argue the case for their right to express their outright frustration with what is going on. Some are liberals and some are conservatives and some are libertarians and some are strict constitutionalists. And if you read carefully a lot of what I've written on economic policy over the last 10, 15 years, I talk a lot about this, that eventually we will go bankrupt. Eventually we will undermine our productivity. We've had no new jobs in the past 10 years, yet we've had 30 million increase in our population. That eventually our jobs would go overseas and the pie would shrink, and there would be an aggressive attitude to get a piece of the pie that's no longer there. And this is what we're seeing. So you will have a mixture up there. But as far as the federal government involved in the practice of civil disobedience in the various states, it's really up to the states to deal with it. I think civil disobedience, if everybody knows exactly what they're doing, is a legitimate effort. It's been done in this country for many grievances, and some people end up going to jail for this. But to speak for a special group and say, yeah, I like what they're doing or they're not doing, but what I want to do is try to sort it out and tell people why they're struggling, and that this was a predictable event, and the solution is really getting a healthy economy back, and you can't get a healthy economy until you deal with the many things I've just got done saying.
You've retained, this is a question from the audience, you've retained a solid block of the Republican vote in the polls. What do you need to do to push into the top tier of the Republican field, and what do you plan to do?
I personally plan to do exactly what I've been doing for 35 years, and that is talking about the philosophy of liberty. And now it's more appropriate because people need something and they don't like what they have. I'll continue to do that, but we're going to continue to run a very well-run campaign. We're raising enough money. We're not competing, of course, with people who can wave a wand and get money from the big donors. But we're going to continue to do the same. But really the litmus test is the primaries. We have to prove ourselves in the early primaries, and that's where we're very encouraged.
So are you focusing your attention in the early part of the process?
Oh, yes. I spend more time in Iowa and New Hampshire, no doubt.
One interesting dynamic of this campaign, which seems a little unique, is not only the shift in leadership in the polls through the process so far, that one person seems to lead 1 month and then may fall to the middle part of the pack after that. The other part is the seeming yearning for someone else to jump into the campaign, and the headlines of the past 24 hours focusing on Chris Christie. How do you explain this yearning, which some voters seem to be engaged in, to see someone else jump in? Does that say anything about the quality of the people who are currently running?
No, I think it represents the failure of the system, and what is offered up is, the status quo. The candidates, I think, that I am up against represent a very much of a status quo, Keynesian spending, militarism, and it doesn't answer the questions. It doesn't even ask the right questions. It doesn't ask the right questions about what liberty is all about, and what about the Federal Reserve and change in the foreign policies. Those questions aren't being asked, and I think that is and they keep looking for others, but quite frankly, I have an uphill battle. For instance, I imagine that everybody in this room, I'll bet, knows who won the straw vote in Florida. I want to see a hand up if you don't know who won the straw vote in Florida. Everybody knows. Does anybody know who won the straw vote in California? There, one person. It just happens that yours truly won the straw vote in California. And but it's a non-event. It was a non-event. So I have an uphill battle, and it was well documented. Matter of fact, the documentation of the total ignoring of me coming in tied for first place, essentially, in the Ames straw vote, we at least were able to turn around that the exclusion of me being tied for first place became an issue, and I think we did quite well. I don't lie awake at night worrying about this, because that's part of the way the system works, but it also explains why, if there is somebody out there offering something different and something American people like, we have to compensate for our ability to get the message out. Where I feel good, if I go to the university campus and get 1,500 young people out, they've gotten the message, because they don't depend on the conventional method of getting their news, and they use the internet. They know what's going on, and they are giving me a lot of encouragement.
So is that to say that you have a problem with the way the news media is treating your campaign?
No, I just accept it because that's the way it's been. All politicians have a problem to a degree. Yes, I would say that if you want to see an explanation of it, look at Jon Stewart. He demonstrated it rather dramatically, exactly what was going on. And yes, it makes a big difference. So, but I think that if we're worth our salt, and we can raise the money, and we can communicate, I would say, for the most part, I really get a pretty fair shake. But sometimes when it's, this whole thing, I'm really not the right person to ask is why these things happen, because I don't have any idea. I think people should be asked why some things news and other things aren't. And it's a fact of life.
Questioner says that you have raised more money than many other Republican presidential candidates. You have legions of small donors and passionate supporters. Why hasn't that translated into a better boost at the polls, and last time around into votes in the primaries as well?
Well, it's a different world compared to 4 years ago, so we can't hardly even talk about it, because the fundraising is easier, the support is much greater, the organization is much more organized, much more professional, and our polls do not discourage us, both in New Hampshire and in Iowa, and that will be the litmus test. You have to finally do well in the polls. You have to overcome all the obstacles of getting the message out and raising the money and getting the organization in. So but as far as progress is concerned, I'm pretty satisfied with the way we've made progress.
So obviously you brought up the issue of fundraising in your speech, and that you're feeling good about that. The questioner asked, what kind of a boost do you think Governor Perry will get from his announcement that he raised $17 million for the campaign, and would he be regarded as the front runner?
Maybe, but if you get $8 million, half as much, and you get it from small individual donors who are fervently engaged in campaigning for you, that's a lot different than getting money that more likely might have come for the other candidates from the special interests. You know, I don't get that type of money. I've been on financial services, you know, for all these years, but, you know, bankers don't come and donate me any money. You know, I wonder why. Because they know where I stand. So, no, I think it's much different. So, all donors are not equal. You know, I will take my smaller donations with the enthusiasm of the people who send me the money.